Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. So, for our topic today, I want to talk about this idea of time, the value of your time, how you figure out what your time is worth. Hello to everyone coming in. Greetings from New Jersey. So, when we look at this issue of the value of our time, I find it layers in from a couple of different levels, right? Like, number one is just as a business owner, as an advisor, like if you got a target, if you got a personal goal, I want to make a certain amount of money. There's only so much time in our day. There's only so much time that we can work. And so just, ever getting to an income goal ultimately drives off of how many hours can you work? What can you make per hour of time? How much do you want to make? Like that's kind of the math, right? Time times dollar per time equals how much money you can make in a year. So I even know a lot of advisors that kind of set their income targets for themselves by saying, look, here's how much I want to make. Here's, how many hours I've got in my day to work. By the time you back out, the time to run the business and a little bit of personal time and all the rest, you can kind of figure out like how many workable client-facing hours can you have in a year. And you can kind of back in the math to figure out how much it is that you ultimately are going to have to charge. If you want to figure out how to make $150,000 a year and you figure realistically you can have 1,000 hours of time sitting across from a client, you better be billing $150 an hour for your time or the math isn't going to add up. And, as I wrote about this on an article a couple of years ago, you can do this math to actually figure out what your time is valued at. I mean, the most simple way, take how much money you make for the year, divide by 2,000, which is roughly 50 weeks and 40 hours a week, and you can figure out how much money you're actually making collectively per hour of your time. For some people, I find it's surprisingly high. Some people, when they do that math, they find surprisingly low. I've used that for years as a mechanism to figure out what should I keep? What should I delegate? If I've got a target for my time and I do the math, anything that doesn't come in at that number is something I need to delegate to someone else, because if I'm valuing my time higher and I can pay them some smaller amount, I expand my business, I expand my income potential, I expand what I can do by delegating that. But I want to talk about just in terms of kind of setting our income goals for this. The point of the conversation really is about pricing for clients. Right, so once we get to this income target or this hourly target, I still know a lot of advisors, we do a version of this internally, where when we want to set our pricing, particularly for something like doing a project financial plan, we might come to someone and say, well, my estimate is it's going to take about 20 hours to construct your plan. We bill at $150 an hour, so this plan's going to cost you $3,000, right? And we literally price out the value of a plan by saying, here's the value of my time. Here's how much time it's going to take. Price of time times time, that's confusing. Price of time multiplied by the hours is how we price things out. And here's the fundamental flaw with that approach. And this was kind of a dramatic moment of realization for me. The problem of this is that it's all about valuing what your time is worth to you. Right? My time is $150 an hour times this many hours is here's what the price is. But the real way that we should be pricing our services is not actually about how valuable it is to us. It's about how valuable it is to the client. What's the value for them of the service that you're providing? And here's where it actually hit me. Ironically, like the first time I had this sort of realization for myself, it actually wasn't from the financial advising work I was doing with clients. It was from my speaking work and kind of the speaking side of my business. So, the reality for speaking, it's kind of a funky balance. You get up there on a podium and talk for an hour and you get paid for the day. The actual hour unit is, a really nice income. Even just when I was getting started, I was doing some writing and consulting and work with clients, and I figured the value of my time was about $150 an hour. And then someone came along and said, "We'll pay you $1,000 to give a speech." I went, "Holy crap! Like that's awesome! I'm going to get paid $1,000, and I'm only up there on the podium for an hour." Now, that was all well and good for the first couple of times I did speaking. And then eventually I realized, all right, this actually isn't quite such a good gig because I got to travel there. I got to travel back. I can only get so much other work done during the day when I'm on the road traveling. So like I might get paid $1,000 for the day, but I kind of blow out a day or a day and a half's worth of time So it's actually not really a great value. And that was one of the things that so was sort of the encouragement for me. I needed to raise my speaking fee. I needed to at least get to the point where if I was going to lose an entire day that I couldn't really work because I was traveling for speaking, I needed to make the value of that day. So when I targeted $150 an hour, through the full span of a day, I was like, all right, I'm not quite making enough at 1,000. I'm going to need to raise it to 1,500. And then I raised it there, and people kept saying yes, and my business was growing. I said, well, some of these, like, I got to travel the day before or the day after. I'm losing like a day and a half. I need to charge $2,000. And so I did that, and it was still basically all built around this concept I had in my head that my time is worth $150 an hour. And then I had a weird problem, nice problem to have. Business kept growing. And people kept coming in and inquiring for more. And eventually I was getting more speaking than I could handle. So I said, what the hell? I'm just going to start charging $3,000. And people said yes. I'm like, oh, well, cool. They're still saying yes at 3. Why don't I try 4? So I started charging 4. And people kept saying yes. And I started charging 5. And people kept saying yes. And I had a weird trouble the first time I tried it to quote someone $5,000 for a speaking engagement, because I still had this thing kind of going on in my head, like, I'm gonna stand on a podium for an hour and talk, and someone's gonna pay me $5,000. Like, this is an insane payoff to time, right? Yeah, Rianka's going like cha-ching. It started screwing with my head a little bit. I couldn't even figure, like, how do you decline a speaking engagement? Like, how bonkers do you have to be to decline something when someone says, I'll give you $5,000 an hour? Like, it's amazing. I couldn't believe it. And I was really struggling with this, like, why does someone pay me $5,000 to stand up on a podium for an hour? And sort of when like, I'm not that amazing. Like, hey, I'd like to think I do some good stuff, but, like, I'm not $5,000 an hour worth of brilliant. I couldn't accept that. Like, there's a lot of smart people out there. And the transition moment that I had, like, the way I had to rework my thinking to get over this, the comments are pointing out, like, you earn it because you earn their trust and attention. And what that really means is it's worth $5,000 because the people listening, or more directly, the event that hires me, it's worth $5,000 for them. It's worth it for them because it's good content for them, which lets them take their entire conference, which might be 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 people, and get those people to come back in the future because they gave them good content. It might bring audience. I see this now, most of the FPA chapters, local events I go to, I'm their biggest meeting all year. I get a good turnout because the industry kind of is familiar with the name. And so for them, they're willing to pay more because I bring audience in. I bring registrations. I bring sponsors. Other people come in. What that means is the value to them is way more than just the per unit time to me, because they're leveraging the value that I bring in other ways: registration fees, sponsorships, good content, renewing, bringing people back in the future, providing them other services while they're there. But here is kind of the takeaway to it. I was getting hung up on the pricing of what I was charging for my time because I was viewing it through my lens and not through theirs. And I think that's a hang up that that's a trap a lot of us get into, where we start, if you're actually having some success, if you're gaining some momentum in your business, and higher income, higher net worth people start engaging you and often paying you a higher price point, I find a lot of us start getting this hang up where we start saying, is the value of my time, like, is it really worth it? We have Carl Richards calls this the imposter syndrome that crops up for some of us, where you start sitting down saying, like, am I really worth that? Like, I'd like to think good about myself and then I'm worth a lot, but, like, really? Is my time really that valuable? And I think it's entirely a trap that we get caught up in ourselves, looking at the value of our time based on what it's worth to us and not the person we're actually delivering services to. The sort of the proverbial, the value really is in the eye of the beholder. It's not about the value to you personally, right? And I think this even comes down to how we interact with clients, how we charge clients, right? Like, why do we charge the same 1% AUM fee to a $1 million client versus a $2 million client, where it might not take us twice as much time to serve the $2 million client as the $1 million client? And I think perhaps the answer to that question is as simple as, because for both of them, to them, it's worth 1% of their AUM to have someone oversee the other 99%. It's not about how many hours of time it takes for us. It's about how much time, how much value it is for them, whether that's in terms of their time or something else, right? Maybe they're just content to say, I am comforted by the peace of mind of paying 1% of my assets to make sure someone is overseeing the other 99%. They might not even be calculating it in terms of time. We do that to figure out our own personal productivity and business metrics. But that's not necessarily what the client is doing at the other end. If you work with some folks that are higher income, they just may value their time differently. For any of you out there who have ever worked with some folks that are at very high net worth, very high income levels, the kind of folks who might pay $300, $400, $500 an hour for services and not blink twice about it, the reason is pretty straightforward. Because they value their time higher. And if you can take a problem off their plate for merely $400 an hour, when they value their time at $500 an hour, they're adding value to their business, their lives, by delegating to you, even if they're paying you more than you're accustomed to getting paid yourself. So I just think about that concept of how you price your services, how you value your time. Because again, I've written about this in the past, all these ways that we can figure out the value of our time by taking our available hours and dividing it by our income goals and figure out what our hourly rate should be, and then start charging that, and then figure out how much time it takes to work with clients and multiply the time by your hourly rate to figure out what you should price them at. And I don't think that's a bad model. Frankly, I lived that for a long time myself, and it allowed me to grow my business. But ultimately, I think you hit a wall with that. And the wall that you hit is that at some point you may find yourself working with people who value your time differently than how you value your time. And the reality at the end of the day is they're the ones that are paying the bill, not you. If they find it incredibly valuable to pay you the equivalent of $500 an hour to do what you do, and they're happy with it because they feel it's value to them, that's not something I think you need to feel guilty about. That's not you ripping off some clients because they're paying you $500 an hour and you used to only bill $150 an hour. That's you delivering that much value. Frankly, that should be you saying, wow, I need to find more clients like this who think this is my value, because people who value me this way are willing to pay $500 an hour, and people who I just bill my hours to only pay me $150 an hour. But recognize that dynamic, that the value of our time as a professional really ultimately at the end of the day shouldn't actually drive off of how we value our time. It should drive off of how the client values the time. Now, certainly you have to hit your goals as well. If you're working with clients who only value your time at $30 an hour, this may not hit the long-term goals that you've got. What that means is you're going to quote them things at $150 an hour, and they're going to say no, and you're not going to work together, which is fine. So it's not necessarily about saying, I have to do whatever the client wants me to do, whatever price the client wants to pay. But just recognize this transition that ultimately it's not about the value of your time to you. It's about the value of your time to the client you're trying to serve. What do they value it at? Can you define that effectively? If you've got a good match, you're going to charge high prices, or what might feel high to you, and they're going to say yes, because it's not high to them, because it has value to them. So I'm curious for thoughts from some of you. A few of you have been adding comments as you've gone. Like, does this resonate with you? Have any of you ever gotten the Carl Richards imposter syndrome? Maybe working with your biggest client and saying, I feel like I'm really valuable to this client, but I honestly still can't believe they actually pay me this much money to do what I do. I know, at least offline, I've heard this from a couple of you out there that we get caught up in this feeling of some point. If you're having success, if your business is growing, and you start saying, I can't believe how much they actually pay me to do this work, especially if you like what you do, right? Like, I can't believe I'm getting paid this well to do the work that I like to do. But just recognize the reason is it's because of what the value is to them, not just what the value is to you. What the value is to you, I think, is basically it's the floor, it's the minimum, right? If you can't at least value my time at this level, I don't want to work with you. But when you're trying to grow from there, recognize that at some point, it's really going to be about the value of your time to them, not the value of your time to you. And of course, ironically, kind of the reality of it, the further you move up the income and net worth scale, the larger the dollar amounts tend to get. And people with larger dollars tend to value time higher. Just that's how the math works for them. So I think that's frankly one of the reasons why we see so many advisors kind of creep up the income and net worth scale as they're more successful, because that's where you transition from what's your time worth to you to what's your time worth for the client. And the people with the larger dollar amounts value their time more highly, and that tends to float down who they're serving. But in any event, I hope that's helpful for you. It's just some food for thought. Maybe a new way to think about how you price your time, how you price your services, who you're trying to serve, and what you're doing for them. Don't think about it just in terms of how much time does it take me to deliver this. That should set the minimum charge you're going to make, right? Because you don't want to go backwards on your personal growth. But ultimately, it's not about what's your time worth to you. It's about what's your time worth to them, and how can you add value to the client at whatever price point is meaningful for them, which may or may not have any relationship to how you value your time. So I hope that's helpful for some food for thought today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Office Hours with Michael Kitces every Tuesday at 1 p.m. East Coast time. And have a great day, everyone.